The NFL Draft, the time of the year where the worst teams actually have something to get excited over. As much as the idea of a first overall pick coming in and saving your team can be exciting, more often than not, these picks end up not working out. Today I wanted to go over the last 10 years of first overall picks, how their careers are panning out, and grade each selection based on if it actually improves the team in a meaningful way. This is what happened to every first overall pick since 2015. I also wanted to give a huge thank you for helping me hit 10,000 subscribers. We are growing like crazy, and you should sub if you haven't already. In 2015, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers held the first overall pick. They were in desperate need of a quarterback, and thankfully for them, there was a quarterback named Jameis Winston who was entering the league. He had attended Florida State University, where he had won a BCS national championship in 2013, and also picked up the Heisman Trophy that year. In 2014, he led the Seminoles to a 13-0 record, and he would leave his college career behind with only one career loss that came in the Rose Bowl against Oregon. Everyone thought he was going to be the perfect fit for the Buccaneers, so it was absolutely no surprise when he was selected first overall. Sure, there were some concerns about his decision-making ability and leadership skills, but that's why teams are supposed to develop draft picks, right? The first season with Jameis made it seem like he was on his way to being an all-pro level quarterback. He threw for over 4,000 yards, 22 touchdowns, and 15 interceptions, with another 200 yards and 6 touchdowns rushing. Sure, the Buccaneers had only gone 6-10, but considering he didn't have much help around him, everyone was super hopeful he could turn it around. He made the Pro Bowl, broke most rookie records in Tampa, and everyone was excited. In 2016, he still threw for 4,000 yards again, upped his touchdown total to 28, and the Bucs improved to 9-7, barely missing the playoffs. Sure, he had an issue with turnovers, but it was only his second year in the league. In 2017 is when things started to go off the rails. He ended up missing 3 games with a shoulder injury and threw for 3,500 yards, while the Bucs dropped to 5-11. In 2018, he ended up getting suspended for 3 games over an incident where a female Uber driver accused Jameis of groping her in 2016. He was still playing well, but he wasn't improving in a way the Buccaneers needed. The Bucs declined his 5th-year option, and honestly, it seemed like he needed a miracle to stay on the team. And then the most confusing statistical season for a quarterback happened. In 2019, Jameis led the league in passing yards with over 5,000, alongside 33 touchdowns. That seems like a guarantee you'll keep your job, right? The issue was he also had 30 interceptions, 7 of which were taken to the house. He was the first quarterback to ever have 30 touchdowns and interceptions in the same season. Since the Bucs had declined his 5th-year option, they let him walk and ended up signing Tom Brady shortly after. Jameis was clearly talented enough to stay in the league and ended up moving on to the Saints, where he backed up Drew Brees for the entire year. In 2021, he earned the starting job, and in his first 7 starts had 14 touchdowns to just 3 interceptions. He was finally learning, or so it seemed. However, in week 8, he tore his ACL and was out for the rest of the season. The next year, he would end up losing his starting job to Andy Dalton after just 3 starts. He would spend 2023 on the bench in New Orleans, before moving to the Browns to back up everyone's favorite massage king Deshaun Watson. When Deshaun went down to injury, Watson took over and ended up breaking the Browns' single-game passing record with 497 yards against the Broncos, but they still lost because he threw 3 interceptions, 2 of which were returned for touchdowns. Honestly, Jameis is such an interesting case because he is clearly incredibly talented, but just can't seem to not turn the ball over. I also think he is one of the most entertaining players in the league because every interview he does is comedy gold. I would say honestly, while this pick didn't really work out in terms of him being a championship quarterback, the fact he threw for over 5,000 yards in a single season keeps him out of worst draft bust of all time territory. But he definitely didn't have the production the Bucs were hoping for. He is now on the Giants, but will probably be a backup or QB3 behind Russell and Jackson Dart. Overall, I would give this pick a C-. In 2016, the first overall pick was another quarterback by the name of Jared Goff. He was drafted out of Cal, and he had tons of hype because he had just broken the Pac-12 single-season passing yardage record with 4,700 yards, alongside a new record for touchdown passes in a season with 43. He had a few solid seasons before that, but that amount of domination catapulted him into being a clear early draft pick for the upcoming draft. Many thought he would end up on the Browns, who had the second overall pick. But then on draft day, the Rams executed a trade with the Titans to get the first overall pick. The Rams had just gotten over the failed Sam Bradford experiment from 6 years earlier. At first, he wasn't named the starter and was expected to sit behind Case Keenum. Case Keenum ended up getting benched in Game 9, and Jared took over for the last 7 games of the season. His rookie year was not great, with him throwing for just 1,000 yards, 5 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions. His completion percentage was just above 50%, but in his second season, the Rams ended up landing coach Sean McVay, which changed everything. In his first game in the new offense, he threw for over 300 yards and touchdown. He finished his second season with 3,800 yards, 28 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions. He ended up winning the Most Improved Player award and also made a Pro Bowl. 2018 saw him take a huge jump, throwing for 4,600 yards, 32 touchdowns, and just 12 interceptions. He led the Rams all the way to the Super Bowl, where they fell short largely due to a disappointing performance by him. That year, the Rams actually tied the record for least points in a Super Bowl. In 2019, he had another 4,600-yard season, but his touchdowns fell off a cliff with 10 less overall scores. His jump in interceptions also made people start to think he wasn't the franchise piece they were hoping for. After another year of regression in 2020, he was traded to the Lions in exchange for Matthew Stafford. Obviously, the Rams would go on to win a Super Bowl with Stafford at the reins, and many thought Jared Goff was on his way to being forgotten, much like his draft brother Carson Wentz. His first season in Detroit was one of his worst seasons as a starter, but in 2022, he bounced back hard. 2023 got even better. He led the Lions all the way to the NFC Championship game, where they would fall short to the 49ers. And in 2024, the Lions had the first overall seed heading into the playoffs, but were knocked out by the Commanders in their first playoff game. Overall, I do think he is a solid first overall pick. He has a Super Bowl appearance, clearly can manage to win games in the playoffs, and has now had some success on 2 different teams. I think when you compare this to how many quarterbacks taken first overall are clear flops, you have to give the selection of Jared Goff at least a B+ grade overall. 2017 is honestly probably one of the best first-round picks we've seen in the last 10 years. Myles Garrett was a clear star coming out of college. He had dominated defensively, and by the end of the pre-draft process was the consensus first overall pick by most analysts. When the Browns called his name first overall, he became the highest drafted player from his college in the program's history. Hugh Jackson, widely regarded as one of the worst head coaches of all time, actually managed to knock it out of the park with just this one pick. Garrett suffered an ankle sprain and missed the first 4 games of his rookie season, but when he finally stepped onto the field, he managed to secure a sack on his very first play in the NFL. Despite missing 4 games, he wound up leading the Browns in sacks, with 7 on the season. 2018 was his first full year, and he showed he was an absolute star. He managed 13.5 sacks, 44 tackles, and 3 forced fumbles. He was named to the All-NFL Top 100 Players list and made his first Pro Bowl. In 2019, he got off to a great start, but in Week 11 got into his infamous brawl with Mason Rudolph, where he swung a helmet at Rudolph after a much-disputed altercation. For this, he was suspended indefinitely and wouldn't be reinstated until the beginning of the next year. Despite his suspension, the Browns signed him to a 5-year contract, and he made good on it by making the All-Pro team that year. He had 12 sacks and 48 tackles in just 14 games. While his career was great already, he took a huge jump in 2021 and 2022 when he recorded 16 sacks in both seasons. In 2023, he took yet another leap by winning NFL Defensive Player of the Year, despite a slight drop in his overall production. 2024 was another solid season. At this point in his career, he already has over 100 sacks in his career, alongside being a perennial Pro Bowl and All-NFL player. Honestly, as far as first overall picks go, this is the definition of an A grade. He is truly probably the best defensive player the Browns have had ever since they came back to Cleveland as an expansion team again. While Hugh Jackson was garbage, I think most Browns fans are grateful for the fact they managed to get Myles Garrett out of the mess. However, Hugh Jackson was so bad that they also ended up with the first overall pick in 2018. This time around, they ended up selecting Baker Mayfield, who was coming off a great college career at Oklahoma. He had thrown for 4,600 yards and 43 touchdowns in his last college season, winning the Heisman Trophy with 86% of the vote. This made him the only walk-on player to win the Heisman at the time, and that combined with his elite on the field play made him a clear first overall pick. The Browns were coming off the failure of Johnny Football and still needed someone to step in and be the franchise cornerstone. He would make his NFL debut in week 3 after Tyrod Taylor went down with injury. He led the Browns on a comeback where they would end up breaking their 19-game losing streak. He broke Peyton Manning's record for most touchdowns as a rookie with 27, and also led the Browns to their best overall record since 2007, despite it still being a losing record. For the first time in a long time, Browns fans were actually hopeful they would have a franchise quarterback for the foreseeable future. His second season saw him throw for 3,800 yards and 22 touchdowns, but he started to have an issue with turnovers where he nearly doubled his interceptions on the year. The Browns wound up 6-10, but then 2020 happened. In 2020, Baker led the Browns to an 11-5 record, making the playoffs and winning the Browns their first playoff game since 1994. He also managed to drastically reduce his interceptions, and everyone thought he had finally cracked the code and overcame his sophomore slump. In 2021, it was revealed that he had played most of the season with a partially torn labrum he suffered in week 2. Eventually, the injury was re-aggravated, and he would miss a few games due to this injury. He announced he was going to undergo surgery in the offseason and was placed on the injured reserve. That offseason, the Browns would make their infamous trade for Deshaun Watson, despite Baker being their first playoff winning quarterback in nearly 2 decades. After this, Mayfield requested a trade and was sent to the Panthers in exchange for a 5th-round pick. His time on the Panthers was pretty rough, but considering they are just a dumpster fire, he decided to request a release shortly into the season and wound up on the Rams after they claimed him off waivers. While he didn't play well in LA, it was enough to get him a shot at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers after Tom Brady retired. This was the first time the league had seen Mayfield in a situation that actually wasn't a sinking ship. In his first season, he threw for over 4,000 yards and 28 touchdowns and would take the Buccaneers to the playoffs, where he would throw for 686 yards and 6 touchdowns in 2 games. While they were knocked out, he came back this last season and played even better, throwing for 4,500 yards and 41 touchdowns, alongside taking the Bucs back to the playoffs. While Mayfield definitely didn't save Cleveland, I firmly believe no quarterback has the ability to save that franchise as it currently exists. The fact he's been able to overcome being tossed around the league and is now having 41 touchdown seasons shows that if he had been in a good situation from the beginning, the sky would have been the limit. I think Tampa has their franchise quarterback of the foreseeable future, and Baker has finally found a good situation for the first time in his career. Overall, I would give this a B+, but the Browns managed to blow it up in spectacular fashion, which is not in any way surprising. If you love Call of Duty as much as this next player, then you're probably pretty good at it. In 2018, Kyler Murray took over the reins for Baker Mayfield at Oklahoma. He managed to be an even better quarterback with over 4,300 passing yards, 42 touchdowns, and another 1,000 yards on the ground alongside an additional 12 touchdowns. He was such a great athlete that even before the NFL draft, the Oakland Athletics took him with the 9th overall pick of the MLB draft that year. The Cardinals had just come off a dumpster fire of a year after picking Josh Rosen and immediately realizing that was a huge mistake. They hired Cliff Kingsbury, who wanted nothing to do with Rosen, and instead used their first overall pick to select Murray. In his first game, he looked like a star, throwing for 308 yards and 2 touchdowns, alongside leading the Cardinals on a late game comeback. His rookie year ended with 3,700 passing yards, 20 passing touchdowns, and 544 rushing yards with another 4 touchdowns. He was named to the Pro Bowl and also won Offensive Rookie of the Year. His second season saw him get even better, throwing for nearly 4,000 yards alongside 26 touchdowns and increasing his rushing total to 819 yards with 7 more touchdowns. Everyone thought that the team had really found the secret weapon to take them to the next level. The beginning of the 2021 season was great. Through the first 7 games, it seemed like Murray was a clear lock for league MVP. He was injured after leading them to a 7-0 start and would miss 3 weeks of the season. He still managed to take them to the playoffs, but it was there his ability to perform on the biggest stage was exposed. In the wildcard round, he threw for just 137 yards, 0 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions, leading to an overall quarterback rating of just 40. That offseason, the Cardinals signed him to a $230 million extension, and in the contract was a clause saying that he actually had to watch film as a condition. This was obviously embarrassing, as the rumors of him liking Call of Duty more than football were somewhat confirmed. 2022 saw a drastic decline in his performance. He played in just 11 games before suffering an ACL tear. Before his injury, his play had fallen off a cliff. He had just 2,300 passing yards and 14 touchdowns to 7 interceptions. His rushing was on track to be his best season, but his ability to put the ball in the end zone on the ground was a bit weaker. In 2023, he missed a majority of the season while rehabbing his ACL tear, but when he did play, he had one of his worst seasons by QBR to date. Everyone was starting to think this experiment had maybe failed, but in 2024, he managed to shut up most of his doubters. This last season, he threw for 380 yards, 21 touchdowns, and another 575 rushing yards on 7.4 yards per attempt with an additional 5 touchdowns. The Cardinals only went 8-9, but considering the only thing they really have going for them is Kyler Murray, you can't really blame him for that. Overall, I think Kyler will go down as a solid QB. The fact he has a losing record hurts him a bit, and he does seem pretty injury prone at this point. However, when he is on the field and healthy, it's hard to find anyone who can do more for his team than him, so I will grade this one at a B+, similar to Baker Mayfield. 2020, the year everything went to crap, unless you were in the Bengals draft room. The Bengals had secured the first overall pick, and Joe Burrow was coming off a year at LSU with 5,600 passing yards, 60 touchdowns, and a national championship. Clearly some elite pedigree. That season is widely regarded as one of the best college football seasons of all time. It was a literal no-brainer that he was going to be the first overall pick no matter what. The Bengals selected him, and he immediately became the starter. Things seemed cursed pretty quickly when in week 11, Burrow went down with a torn ACL and MCL in his left knee, alongside some pretty serious damage to the PCL. Many thought that this would be a potentially career-ending injury, and considering his rookie season had been going pretty well, most Bengals fans were on depression pills. However, in 2021, he came back by week 1 and managed to lead the Bengals to a 10-6 record on 4,600 passing yards, 34 touchdowns, 14 interceptions, and another 2 rushing touchdowns. This led them to the playoffs, where Burrow balled out and led the Bengals to their first Super Bowl since 1988. He threw for 263 yards and a touchdown in the Super Bowl, but was sacked 7 times. Despite that, they only lost the game by 3 points, even though Burrow set a playoff record for most sacks in a postseason. At this point, it was clear he was here to stay, and in 2022, the Bengals improved to 12-4. He had another 4,000-yard season, and they would get all the way to the AFC Championship game before losing to the Chiefs. Hopes were high going into 2023, but he would play in just 5 games due to 2 separate injuries on his calf and wrist. In 2024, he had a career-best season throwing for nearly 5,000 yards, 43 touchdowns, and leading the Bengals to another winning season. His biggest issue is that his defense is absolutely abysmal. No matter how much he scores, the defense managed to throw the game away despite having one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Overall, I would say this is probably an A- as far as draft picks go. I think when he is on the field, he is definitely one of the more elite quarterbacks in the league, but he does seem to have an injury problem. It doesn't help that he seems to spend a lot of games running for his life, which isn't his fault. However, missing most of 2 seasons does not do a team good. Statistically, he spent about 40% of his NFL season being injured in some capacity, and I am not saying that it's his fault. I think the Bengals are going to invest a lot more in getting him a good defense and offensive line, and if they do that well, this easily becomes an A+ grade. Completing the list of the 4 straight quarterbacks taken first overall is none other than Trevor Lawrence. In 2019, he led Clemson to a national championship game where he fell short to Joe Burrow. His junior year was cut short due to COVID protocols, but he showed a similar amount of efficiency and as such became a clear #1 overall pick in the upcoming draft. He was so desired that the worst teams started a trend called Tank for Trevor, where they hoped to lose more games in order to get him as their quarterback. His first year was rocky, but considering he had the supporting cast of a high school play, it wasn't as bad as it could have been. He threw for 30 3,600 yards, 12 touchdowns, but with 17 interceptions, it left a lot to be desired. In 2022, though, he had a breakout season with 4,000 passing yards, 25 touchdowns, just 8 interceptions, and had the Jaguars win their first divisional title since 2017. He narrowly beat out the Chargers in the wildcard round of the playoffs before falling short the next week to the Chiefs, who went on to win the Super Bowl. In 2023, he had another 4,000-yard season with 21 touchdowns, but nearly doubled his interceptions on the year. In 2024, he was off to a much worse year, and honestly probably would have had one of his weakest seasons since his rookie year. However, in a game against the Texans, he suffered a brutal hit that caused one of the biggest NFL brawls in recent memory. He received a severe concussion as a result and was placed on the injured reserve shortly after. I will say, while Lawrence hasn't been able to save the Jaguars, it's hard to expect him to do much with their current roster. Hopefully, Travis Henry can do a lot to revitalize their offense, and Trevor can stay healthy. Much like Joe Burrow, he seems prone to suffering a lot of injuries, but it's hard to tell if that's because he's fragile or because he's constantly being decimated by defenses due to his weak offensive line. Overall, I would give this draft pick a C+, just because the Jaguars remain in purgatory, but if he has a good season this year, I think this could easily become a B+. I think the hype that surrounded him out of college sort of undercuts his effectiveness overall in terms of his grade. The year after the Jags got Trevor Lawrence, they followed it up with a solid player on this list, and that is none other than Travon Walker. Travon Walker had a solid junior year at Georgia where they won the national championship, and he racked up 6 sacks. That isn't insanely elite, but it was good. It helped that he was a total athletic freak of nature, and the Jags thought if they could sharpen his game, they could turn him into one of the best defensive weapons in the league. Honestly, looking back at it, there are a lot of question marks about why he really went first overall. His rookie season was not incredible, with only 3.5 sacks. However, in 2023, he followed it up with a solid campaign where he had 52 tackles alongside 10 sacks. In 2024, he would follow it up with 10.5 sacks, with 61 total tackles. This is a solid defensive player for sure, but when you compare it to someone like Myles Garrett, 10 sacks starts to appear a little bit underwhelming for a first overall pick in the NFL draft. It isn't that Travon is bad, I just think the expectations for him were so astronomically high, considering he went first overall as a defensive end, that it can be almost impossible to make an impact like some of the players before him. He has done a good enough job for the Jaguars to pick up his first year option, but I think the whole football world is waiting for him to really develop into what people expected when he came out of college. Overall, I would grade this pick at a C+. Not to be disrespectful, it's just hard when the last defensive end taken before you is Myles Garrett. In 2023, the Panthers were an absolute dumpster fire, and largely still are. They had the 9th overall pick and some trade pieces, and with it, were definitely looking to secure a franchise quarterback to carry them into the future. In his sophomore year of college, he won the Heisman Trophy, Player of the Year, Manning Aware, and SEC Offensive Player of the Year. He threw for 4,800 yards, 47 touchdowns, and had another 3 touchdowns on the ground. His junior season saw him regress slightly, throwing for just 3,300 yards and 32 touchdowns. He did strongly increase his rushing game, but his second college season was so impressive, teams were foaming at the mouth for him. The Panthers traded their 9th overall pick, DJ Moore, and several other draft picks to the Bears in exchange for the 1st overall pick. They selected Bryce Young, and he started his first 2 games, which were mid to say the best. In week 3, he was ruled out with injury, but overall, his rookie season was disappointing. He threw for just 2,800 yards, 11 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions. This wasn't entirely his fault, considering that his offensive line was pretty much non-existent, but he would end the season with the lowest touchdown percentage of any quarterback in the league. In his second season, he was benched in his 3rd game for Andy Dalton, but would win back the starting role partway through the season. His second season was better, with him throwing for 2,400 yards, 15 touchdowns to 9 interceptions in just 12 starts. I think Bryce Young is a curious case because sometimes he looks like he has the potential to carry a team, but he's stuck on the Panthers running for his life most of the time. The other part of the time, it looks like you gave a drunk toddler a Madden controller and told him to figure it out and hoped for the best. If he keeps getting sacked as much as he does, it's going to be very hard for him to develop. I don't think it's time to throw in the towel on Bryce Young just yet, but if I had to make a judgment at the current point and time, I think this pick currently is sitting at a disappointing D grade. Speaking of quarterbacks who are stuck in terrible situations, I think we all are aware Caleb Williams has gotten himself stuck in quarterback hell. The Bears haven't had a true franchise quarterback since the 1940s and 50s. He is a product out of USC, where he was a strong dual-threat quarterback who had 2 great seasons but had a big drop in production during his senior season. He did win the Heisman Trophy in his sophomore year, much like Bryce Young, and most of the draft analysts predicted he was going to be the first overall pick. He didn't really want to go to Chicago, but he had no choice when they selected him with the first overall pick. He clearly got the fan base excited as he broke the Fanatics record for first day jersey sales. In his first season, he threw for 3,500 yards, 20 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions. Honestly, that is not a bad season considering he led the league in sacks with 68. Most of the time, watching the Bears was painful because of how often he was under pressure. He was spending most of the time scrambling around and still managed to throw only 6 interceptions, which isn't the worst thing ever. However, he does have a tendency to hold onto the ball way too long. He also had another 500 yards on the ground, mainly because he had no other option. He did also break a record with 354 straight passes without an interception as a rookie. I think the franchise has things to be hopeful about, but if they don't get him some protection, he is just going to fail through no fault of his own. Right now, I would put this at a strong B+. The main thing holding it back is how much success other rookie quarterbacks had last year. This year, the first overall pick was obviously Cam Ward to the Titans. It's way too soon to know if he will succeed in the NFL, but I think if he can rein in his tendency to make risky throws and trying to carry the team on his back, he will be plenty successful. The Titans haven't had a really strong option at quarterback since Ryan Tannehill, and even that wasn't exactly perfect. I think Cam Ward has all the tools to succeed, but we'll just have to wait and see, and I can't give it a grade until I see him on the field. Those are the last 10 first overall picks. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to press the like button and subscribe. Our next goal is 15,000 subscribers, and we would love your help getting there. If this video gets 1,000 likes, we will do another one going over 2005 to 2015, and those are a lot easier to grade considering most of them have either completed most of their career or are already out of the league. Thank you for watching.